Welcome on in to an edition of Falcons Today by Chat Sports. Matthew Peterson here recapping two big pieces of news for Atlanta. Both are not good. Drew Dalman leaving the Falcons, signing with the Chicago Bears on a 3-year, $42 million contract with $28 million guaranteed. That pays him an average of $14 million a season, second most amongst all centers in football. And I don't quite know how to feel other than slightly peeved that it seems like Atlanta never really made a big effort to bring Dalman back. 30 minutes into legal tampering, and he already signs with the Bears. That signals a lot to me. That signals the Falcons were comfortable with letting Dalman go almost no matter what. And for $14 million, this is the definition of like half glass full, half glass empty. It's not a ton of money, $14 million a season. You're paying Darnell Mooney $13 million a season. I think Dalman is a pretty equal caliber player in terms of importance to this team. So from a financial standpoint, it doesn't seem like, hey, the Bears just made an offer that Atlanta could not match whatsoever. It seems like the Falcons were content with saving some money, going with a cheaper option. I fully expect them to re-sign Ryan Neuzil, who replaced Dalman for much of 2024 when he went down with an ankle injury. But still, I think we can all agree, like, it's not, so much money that you can understand how this happened, but it's also a lot of money. $14 million isn't nothing to the stage of, hey, maybe he wasn't quite worth all that money. He was a very good run blocker. He was average in pass protection. Let's go with a cheaper option with Neuzil. And then I'd say you take the savings and apply it to like a defensive lineman, right? Here's the issue. There's not a lot of great defensive linemen in free agency. Khalil Mack re-signed with the Chargers before free agency began. There's Joey Bosa out there. Hassan Reddick signed with the Buccaneers. You could go after Josh Sweat from the Eagles. Now, this is not the only piece of tough news for Falcons fans today. Grady Jarrett was also released, which we'll talk about in a moment. But when it comes to Drew Dalman, let me know what kind of your reaction is. Are you upset or understanding with Atlanta letting Dalman walk in free agency? He was a 4th-round pick out of Stanford, so hopefully Terry Fontenot can find another good quality starting center in round 4 this year. That's one of their 5 picks they currently have in the draft. But Dalman leaving in free agency, if you are looking for like a, hey, thinking 2 steps ahead, maybe that's because the Falcons are currently laying down the foundation for a Trey Hendrickson trade, and they need to have some cap space to give him an extension, and they figure Hendrickson is a bigger piece of value to us than Dalman. And that part I can agree with. But if the Falcons let Dalman walk and they don't make any type of signings whatsoever of note, this is going to look like Arthur Blank being a cheapo. So I'm going to be somewhat optimistic of they made this move because they are currently in the works of something bigger and better. But until that bigger and better thing comes along, it looks a little bad for Atlanta to move on from a quality starting center for $14 million. I projected him getting $16 million. So a little bit less than what I thought he could get. Creed Humphrey makes the most in the NFL at $18 million a season. So it's not like this was unreachable money in contract value for Atlanta to get to. I'm curious to see what the Falcons have working right now, because I feel like if it was just $14 million, that could have been accomplished, especially because you cut Grady Jarrett this morning, which we'll talk about next in more detail. But make sure to subscribe to the channel if you're looking for a Falcons YouTube channel that's going to keep you up to speed during all of NFL free agency. Scroll on down and click that sub button today. Lock yourself in for the best free Falcons content available. Now, Jarrett was released by Atlanta right before the start of NFL free agency. It always felt like it'd come down to Jarrett or David Onyemata. I thought there could be an opportunity of a pay cut. Did not happen. $16 million in cap savings. If you're trying to hold on to a sliver of hope that he might return, there's a possibility that the Falcons went to Jarrett's camp and said, hey, we can't pay you X, but we can pay you Y. And If you don't like that, we can release you, and you can see if someone else would pay you more than Y. And if he goes to free agency and discovers no one's willing to pay me Z in the middle, then he comes back to Atlanta for Y because he's getting the same amount of money anywhere else, and he'd rather stay put with the Falcons. But 31, turning 32 years old, ACL tear in 2023. I don't think he was bad in 2024. I still think he has a spot in the league. I still think he could even be a starter in the NFL. But for the cap savings, the age, I can understand how Atlanta got to this point, but it's still never a good feeling seeing your favorite team, or, you know, Falcons fans' favorite team, of course, move on from a captain and a guy who's been here for, well, what was the second longest of any player on the team. Now it is just Jake Matthews. So Grady Jarrett gone for now. Slight chance of a return, but we shall see. Some other news, by the way, that came out yesterday. Jake Matthews signed a 2-year contract extension with Atlanta. That extension opened up some cap space for the Falcons, and that also locks Matthews in for the next 4 seasons. He already had 2 years remaining on his previous contract. This added 2 more years onto it. Now, it's a contract that pays him $22.5 million a season, so 2 years, $45 million. $22.5 million per year for a left tackle for someone of Matthews' caliber, I think is pretty fair. I've always thought Matthews is one of the better tackles in football that never seems to come up in discussion when talking about some of the most sturdy, reliable left tackles in our game. So I'm a fan of this move right here for Atlanta. I think Matthews is still playing at a high level. He did not look like someone who's about to fall off a cliff. He's always been extremely available for this team. Ran into a little bit of an injury scare at times the past 2 seasons, but nothing too major, too serious. So it frees up some cap space. And with the Grady Jarrett release and the Jake Matthews contract restructure, I'll check out right now what the updated cap space is for Atlanta. Cap space is always a very fluid thing, so don't get too attached to any specific number. But right now, I'd say it's around $22-ish million, $23-ish million, somewhere in that neck of the woods. So that's some of the big news that has gone on so far for the Falcons. Appreciate everyone for tuning in and watching. We've got Dalman going to Chicago. The Falcons likely going to be targeting Ryan Newsel on a very cheap 2-year contract. He's a restricted free agent, I believe, so should not be very difficult to bring him back at a very cheap value. And they're just going to roll the dice a little bit on a cheaper option that's not going to be as good as Dalman, but the idea or the thinking would be you take the savings from Dalman and you put it somewhere else on your roster. If Atlanta comes out of this without putting that money somewhere else on their roster, there's going to be a lot of upset fans in Atlanta. And then Jake Matthews and Grady Jarrett, one getting an extension and the other one, unfortunately, getting released after 10 years with the Dirty Birds. That will do it for us. A quick reminder to subscribe to the channel if you have not already, like I said at the beginning or the middle of the video, and hit that thumbs up button down below as you make your way out of here if you enjoyed our free content.